I will miss you so much, Mom and Dad. After Rob Reiner's passing, the pain did not end at the funeral. It quietly spread, turning into an even deeper wound. When the final will was revealed, Roy and Jake were left frozen in disbelief. The entire massive fortune, estimated at around $200 million, built over decades of work, fame, and legacy, had been donated in full to charitable foundations. In that instant, their grief transformed into something else. A feeling of being pushed out of their own family's story. Shock quickly turned into anger. Sources say Jake could not contain himself, believing his parents had chosen the world over their own children. Calls to lawyers followed one after another, marking the beginning of a tense legal battle that quickly drew public attention. As legal proceedings began, layer by layer, truths started to surface, peeling back the private world the Reiner family had long kept closed. Nearly 2 weeks after the heartbreaking tragedy of December 14, 2025, when Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner were found deceased in their Brentwood home, the family was finally able to hold a quiet, private farewell. After the Los Angeles County coroner completed the examinations, the remains of the couple were released to the family. By December 19, official records listed Jake Reiner, the eldest son, as the informant on both death certificates and the recipient of the ashes. Documents from the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health confirmed that Rob and Michelle Reiner were cremated at Mount Sinai Mortuary, a prestigious Jewish funeral home in the Hollywood Hills. Mount Sinai Mortuary is more than a cremation site. It is closely associated with Mount Sinai Memorial Park, a sacred resting place revered by the Jewish community and the final home of many Hollywood icons. The process was carried out swiftly, in accordance with Jewish tradition, which calls for burial as soon as possible. Suppose I had issues, and I probably did, with marijuana. I was heavily addicted, about 15 to 25 joints a day. I'd been on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication since I was 15 or 16. I had suicidal thoughts, but I never acted on them. Still submerged in grief, Romy and Jake handled everything in silence, avoiding all attention. No media. No crowds. Just a small circle of loved ones. In a deeply painful gesture, the ashes of Rob and Michelle were brought to Jake's home, so the children could keep their parents close during the darkest days of mourning. Sources close to the family said no final decision had yet been made about a permanent resting place. Some suggested the ashes might be scattered at a meaningful location, or that a portion would be interred in a family plot. But the calm did not last. Soon after, cameras from major networks like ABC News, Fox News, and NBC captured images of Romy and Jake entering a prominent law office in Beverly Hills, one known for handling complex inheritance disputes among Hollywood's elite. Dressed in dark clothing, wearing sunglasses, their faces showed clear exhaustion and grief. They said nothing, despite photographers shouting questions. Those images spread rapidly online, accompanied by sensational headlines about a $200 million inheritance war. That was enough to ignite widespread speculation. The public began asking, why were they consulting lawyers so soon, when there had been no official announcement about asset distribution, not even confirmation that the will had been formally opened? Romy remained completely silent, her eyes heavy with sorrow, while Jake walked ahead, shielding his sister from the blinding flashes. Reporters pressed them with questions about inheritance rights and asset control. Has Rob Reiner's will been validated yet? Who is managing the estate during the interim? The questions echoed through the cold hallway. Utterly detached from the raw grief of two people who had lost their parents less than 2 weeks earlier. You can still be Wesley and Buttercup. Hopefully we'll remember some of this. Remember that we once had it. And then, when it seemed the story could not grow more painful, a new revelation exploded like a bomb. A source close to the family disclosed that Rob Reiner had planned something no one expected, nearly the entire $200 million fortune was to be transferred to charitable organizations. The information spread quietly at first, but the shockwaves were undeniable. According to a longtime family friend, Rob's decision did not stem from coldness or rejection. It reflected a philosophy he had embraced for years. He believed children must stand on their own feet. To him, inheriting too much money could become a trap, dulling motivation and stealing life's meaning. The friend shared that Rob often spoke about independence. He believed Jake, Romy, and Nick each needed to carve their own paths, though for different reasons. For Nick, who had struggled with personal issues for years, Rob believed stepping outside the comfort zone and confronting real life was the only way to mature and regain clarity. Rob reportedly said that if he continued to protect Nick, his son would never learn responsibility. Another close friend explained that, in Rob's mind, giving a large inheritance to someone emotionally unstable was like pouring fuel on an open flame. He believed the only true teacher was life itself, through work, effort, and direct confrontation with reality. Jake and Romy were different. Rob saw in them the independence he valued most. Jake had an established career and his own life. Romy was deeply engaged in her creative projects. To Rob, both had proven they did not need inheritance money to define their worth. He even joked once, "My kids can handle it. They're stronger than people think." For Rob, success was not measured by how much money parents left behind, but by whether their children could continue living with purpose after they were gone. Long before his death, he made his intentions clear. Most of his wealth would go to charity. He believed money should continue serving society, rather than becoming a false comfort that weakened the next generation. Sources say Rob also entrusted Romy with selling the Brentwood house and other properties, directing that all proceeds be transferred directly to the carefully chosen charities he and Michelle had supported for years, organizations focused on education, healthcare, and social programs. A family friend recalled a seemingly casual conversation that later sounded prophetic. "Parents don't live to pave the road for their children. They live to teach them how to walk." That belief guided Rob until his final days. He knew his children might be hurt, even feel betrayed, but he believed one day they would understand. That belief, however, became painfully complicated when tragedy struck. Even if Nick was not legally excluded from inheritance despite investigations surrounding him, not a single child was left, even a dollar. This realization hit Jake and Romy hard. What followed was no longer just paperwork. It was grief turning into resistance. Behind the closed doors of the Beverly Hills law office, the siblings reportedly faced their attorneys in disbelief. Overwhelmed, Romy broke down in tears, saying, "This isn't fair." Jake's reaction was fiercer. They chose to care about the whole world, but forgot their own children. These were not words of greed, but cries of deep pain, the feeling of being abandoned by the very people who had taught them compassion. They were not angry at charity. They were angry at being erased from their own family story. Determined to reclaim justice, Jake and Romy began exploring every legal avenue to challenge the will, the timing of its creation, the structure of the trusts, any potentially disputable clauses. They quickly assembled a top-tier legal team specializing in Hollywood inheritance cases. Daniel Kraus, famous for overturning seemingly ironclad wills, and Evelyn Hartman, a specialist in charitable trusts, were brought in. In their first tense meeting, Kraus reportedly warned, "If you want fairness, this will be a very long and extremely difficult battle." Jake did not hesitate. "We're not afraid. We've already lost everything." That moment, witnesses said, felt like a sentence of the heart. The legal strategy took shape, challenged the charitable foundations, arguing that they had severed the legitimate bond between the parents' legacy and their biological children. In private conversations, the siblings' intent became clearer. They didn't want just a portion. They wanted everything returned to the family. Romy, usually quiet but resolute, was said to have stated, "I don't want a part. I want it all. They're gone, and we have nothing." The lawyers cautioned that confronting public charities could provoke backlash and damage their parents' reputation. Jake remained firm. "Public opinion is not my family." That sentence captured the emotional storm tearing through the Reiner family, a clash between principle and pain. The legal team began gathering every possible piece of evidence: personal journals, old emails, private notes from Rob. The goal was to show that his final choices might not have fully reflected his emotional state. Krauss reportedly said, "This isn't just a case about money. It's a fight to redefine a father's legacy." At its core, this was not merely a courtroom battle, but a battle of the heart, where love, grief, and resentment collided violently. The very values Rob had preached, independence, responsibility, self-reliance, had now become the source of rebellion by his own children. For Jake and Romy, this was no longer a lesson or a philosophy. It was the pain of never having the chance to ask, why, in time. Outside, the world continued to honor Rob Reiner as a symbol of compassion and social justice. Inside, his family was quietly fracturing under the weight of the ideals he had lived by. "Rob always believed his kids would understand," a family friend said sadly. "But he left before hearing them say they weren't ready." And so the story of Rob and Michelle Reiner's will became far more than a financial dispute. It became a painful reflection on love, legacy, and loss, a reminder that even the noblest intentions can leave wounds no fortune can heal. For decades, Rob and Michelle were admired as one of Hollywood's most devoted and socially conscious couples. Their passion for helping others shaped their entire lives, from early childhood education to equality and human rights. Their most significant project, the I Am Your Child Foundation, stood as living proof of that belief. The foundation was revolutionary for its time, a nonprofit focused on the critical developmental period from birth to age 3. Through powerful educational films like I Am Your Child, The First Years Last Forever, featuring figures such as Tom Hanks and Oprah Winfrey, the project reached millions of American families and reshaped how an entire generation understood early childhood development. Building on that success, Rob founded Parents Action for Children, bringing neuroscience and child psychology into public policy. He led the Proposition 10 campaign, which taxed tobacco, to fund First 5 California, generating billions for children's health care and education. At the same time, Rob co-founded the American Foundation for Equal Rights, contributing to the historic 2015 Supreme Court decision legalizing same-sex marriage nationwide. All of this made Rob's decision to leave his wealth to charity unsurprising to those who truly knew him. It was who he was, a man who believed in long-term purpose over personal comfort. Yet the paradox remains: a fortune built from love, creativity, and a lifetime of work became the source of division after his death. To the world, it was a noble act. To his children, it was the final distance, as if they had been missed in their father's last embrace. Did Rob believe that true love meant teaching independence by leaving nothing behind? Or was it a decision made in solitude, after years of emotional distance that no amount of money could mend? Those questions still linger. Was Rob Reiner's final act the ultimate compassion, or a quiet sorrow? Wisdom, or misunderstanding? Perhaps it was both. Thank you for following this story to the end, a story of legacy, ideals, and unspoken pain. If you have your own thoughts about Rob Reiner's will, or about how love and legacy can collide in unexpected ways, share them in the comments. And if you want to continue following stories like this, about powerful families, hidden truths, and legacies that echo long after the spotlight fades, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because some stories, even after the final page is turned, never truly end. In the days that followed, as public scrutiny intensified, Jake and Romy all but disappeared from public life. No appearances. No statements. No responses. But behind closed doors, their true struggle began. Lawyers came and went. Files were opened page by page. The dry language of law collided with family memories, with evenings once spent together, with laughter that had filled the Brentwood house now standing empty. Jake suffered from chronic insomnia. One question haunted him relentlessly. If my father were alive, would he look me in the eye and tell me I wasn't worthy? Romy was different. She spoke less, but her pain ran deeper. She reread old emails from her mother, simple lines about charity projects, about believing the world could be better if everyone sacrificed a little. Some nights, Romy wondered whether she herself was betraying the values her parents had devoted their lives to. Meanwhile, the charities named in the will remained completely silent. No interviews. No defenses. Only a brief statement from their legal representative. We have a duty to fully respect the final wishes of Mr. Rob Reiner and Mrs. Michelle Singer Reiner. The words felt like a cold wall between two sides. Some of Rob's old friends began speaking out, but not in unison. Some supported his decision, calling it the consistent act of a life lived for the public good. Others sighed, saying Rob trusted ideals too much and underestimated the fragility of the human heart. He loved his children, one longtime colleague said. But he also believed love doesn't always mean indulgence. Public opinion fractured. Online, Rob Reiner was hailed as a rare moral icon of Hollywood. At the same time, many stood with Jake and Romy, arguing that no philosophy has the right to strip a child of the feeling of belonging. Amid the storm, the name Nick Reiner was rarely mentioned publicly. The silence surrounding him felt heavier than any accusation. For Jake and Romy, Nick was both a source of guilt and an unnamed wound. They didn't know whether Nick understood their father's decision, or whether he had the strength to face a world their father believed would teach him to grow. One evening, according to someone close to the family, Jake sat alone in the old living room, where family photos once lined the walls. He stared at a picture of the whole family at a movie premiere, Rob smiling broadly, his hand on his children's shoulders. Jake let out a bitter laugh and whispered, as if his father were still there. You taught me to stand on my own. But you forgot to teach me how to stand when my heart collapses. The lawsuit, whatever its outcome, gradually became more simple than objective. It was no longer simply about money or inheritance rights. It was a desperate attempt to be heard, to be acknowledged as more than side characters in a grand narrative of public compassion. As time passed, a harsh truth emerged. No court ruling could answer the question, why? No legal clause could fill the void left by a conversation that never happened. Rob Reiner had left, taking his explanations with him, leaving those behind to piece together the fragments. Perhaps the greatest legacy Rob left behind was not the $200 million, nor even his iconic films or charitable foundations. It was the debate he inadvertently created, about the fragile line between ideals and family, between teaching independence and making a child feel unconditionally loved. The Reiner family story has no tidy ending. There are no perfect heroes, no clear villains. Only people, each carrying their own pain and convictions, trying to live on after an immeasurable loss. And perhaps years from now, when time has softened the edges, Jake, Romy, and even Nick will look back at that will not only as a verdict, but as an unfinished message. A message they may accept, reject, or never fully embrace, but cannot deny was born from a father who believed love meant leaving the world better than he found it. But a child's love is different. It doesn't need philosophy. It only needs an explanation before it's too late.